Welcome to the Full Strength Father podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Corper, and the founder of Full Strength Father. And today is episode 12 already. Time is flying by. As I mentioned in episode 1, I've just made a commitment to publishing consistently, even though it is oftentimes uncomfortable and I feel not ill-prepared, but inadequate, because the topics that I'm sharing are so profound and motivating for me as a father. I just hope that it can inspire you. And there is a rookie podcast mistake. I have not silenced my notifications. We'll look back on this in a year or 2 years after a couple hundred episodes and laugh at the lack of production quality. Anyways, I have been humbled by this podcast. It's been so motivating for me as a father as I've studied and shared the topics that I have. And so what I've been doing more recently is preparing a masterclass, a free high-value masterclass on physical fitness as a father in 3 key areas that I've discovered, 3 key frameworks that I've implemented that have really helped me stay on the path. And before staying on the path, actually get on the path, because I was struggling a lot not too many months ago. And I share more of that story in episode, I believe, 2 and 3 of this podcast. So go check those out if you want more details on that backstory. So in the preparation of this masterclass, I've realized that one of my strengths / weaknesses is that I like a lot of detail, a lot of information. And so I prepared this entire presentation. I think it was some 150, 200 slides, very detailed, very in-depth. And I showed my wife, and as I was showing her, I said, "You know what? I think this is a little too much." And she goes, "Yeah, it might be a little too much." Essentially, it was making like a college level exercise science class, and I had all these details on human physiology and all this stuff, and I thought to myself, how can I simplify this so that it's memorable? Because all this information is great, but people aren't here. People aren't going to attend this masterclass to just get information. They need actionable, memorable material that's going to really help them walk away. Even if they don't engage in coaching or anything like that, they can walk away with just a ton of value, applicable value. And so I went in and completely revamped my presentation. In that process, I started to think of, this term came to my mind called triple threat. Primarily I had been familiar with that term because I'm a guitar player and I love performing arts. I love music, musicians. And that term triple threat refers to somebody who can play an instrument and who can sing and who can write music. So they are triple threat. I think the term is also used in basketball and other sports too, where you hear of like a 5-tool baseball player, those kind of things. So essentially this is somebody who is very well rounded in their chosen field. So much so that it creates an elite level of performance. Now, I started to think of that as it relates to fatherhood. So what does it mean to be a triple threat father? And my mind went back to the purpose that I've defined in the Full Strength Father doctrine, which is first, lead with integrity, second, provide with consistency, and third, protect our families at all costs. And to my mind came 3 specific traits that help us live that purpose of lead, provide, protect at our highest level. Those 3 traits are essential, and they are mentality, spirituality, and physicality. So the masterclass that I'm putting together deals specifically with that 3rd trait of physicality and all of the expressions of that in fatherhood, essentially physical fitness and our ability to perform mentally and physically, make up our physicality. Now, what I want to share today is dealing specifically with mentality as a father. I've been reading a book, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, that has been incredibly insightful. into mentality. And I would highly recommend it for anybody who's interested in getting some deep insight and motivation and inspiration around this topic. So, what I'd like to do in this episode is just share a few quotes from this book and some insight on them. And my hope is that as we do this together, that you can take away one or two insights that you can go apply in your life when it comes to mentality. And with that foundational understanding that developing our mindset and controlling our thoughts directly helps us better lead, better provide, and better protect for our families. So here's the first quote. Man is made or unmade by himself. In the armory of thought, he forges the weapons by which he destroys himself. He also fashions the tools with which he builds for himself heavenly mansions of joy and strength and peace. By the right choice and true application of thought, man ascends to the divine perfection. By the abuse and wrong application of thought, he descends below the level of the beast. Between these two extremes are all the grades of character, and man is their maker and master. Of all the beautiful truths pertaining to the soul which have been restored and brought to light in this age, none is more gladdening or fruitful of divine promise and confidence than this, that man is the master of thought, the molder of character, and the maker and shaper of condition, environment, and destiny. Thoughts become things. That's me there. But that quote, so powerful, that we forge the weapons by which we destroy ourselves or the tools by which we fashion our heavenly mansions, build heavenly mansions of joy, strength, and peace, that it is our thoughts that are either used to destroy us or to build us to that end. Powerful. The next quote, and this is an analogy that he uses of our mind to a garden. So think about your mind here as it applies to this analogy. Man's mind may be likened to a garden which may be intelligently cultivated or allowed to run wild. But whether cultivated or neglected, it must and will bring forth. If no useful seeds are put into it, then an abundance of useless weed seeds will fall therein, and will continue to produce their kind. Just as a gardener cultivates his plot, keeping it free from weeds, and growing the flowers and fruits which he requires, so may a man tend the garden of his mind, weeding out all the wrong, useless, and impure thoughts, and cultivating toward perfection the flowers and fruits of right, useful, and pure thoughts. By pursuing this process, a man sooner or later discovers that he is the master gardener of his soul, the director of his life. He also reveals within himself the laws of thought and understands with ever-increasing accuracy how the thought forces and mind elements operate in the shaping of his character, circumstances, and destiny. That phrase, if no useful seeds are put into the garden, then an abundance of useless weed seeds will fall therein, was really striking to me. And what I immediately thought of was the subject I've covered in a previous episode briefly, was the attention economy. That we exist in this unique time frame in history where there's an entire economy where millions, if not billions of dollars are exchanged, and everything is predicated on the ability to capture attention. That is what is monetized. And so now, when this was written, I think in the early 1900s, it was a completely different world. And he's saying here, if no useful seeds are put into the mind, then an abundance of useless seeds or thoughts will fall therein. So now I think we have that to the extreme where there's active entities that are working to extract our attention and control our thoughts and that's evidenced by these platforms that we engage in, these social media platforms. They are free, quote unquote, right? Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, you just go down the list. They're all, quote unquote, free platforms. What we don't realize is they are selling our attention to advertisers and making a profit on that. If you go into the back end of these systems, if you have a marketing background, you know what I'm talking about. You can target individuals specifically based on all of the data that they've given these companies in their interaction on these platforms, what they like, what they hesitate on, what they look at from a content standpoint. All of that is aggregated and then leveraged to capture the attention of those individuals. And if I'm an advertiser, I can go in and select for a very specific individual on this platform. And it's because we've given our attention to these platforms and allowed them to target us with advertisements. It's just fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And so the world we live in when it comes to attention and thoughts is very, very, very challenging. And so what are some things that we can take from that? Can we, as fathers, more fully engage in the practice of being aware of where our attention is going? For me, on my home screen on my iPhone, I have a widget that displays screen time. And I also have limiters on my screen time. I will confess in front of all of you that I tend to go over my allotted screen time goal, where it's very easy for me. I think I have it set at 30 minutes or something for these social platforms, but it's very easy for me to be on Instagram and all of a sudden pops up, hey, you've reached your screen time limit for the day. And I just hit passcode and I just go 15 minutes more. So it's such a challenge, but let's bring awareness to that. Because when we reflect on our greater purpose of leading, providing, and protecting and being present with our families, well, if our attention is captured, then we are unable to give it to the most important people in our lives. Love that quote. Okay, next quote. Every thought seed sown or allowed to fall into the mind and to take root there produces its own, blossoming sooner or later into act and bearing its own fruitage of opportunity and circumstance. Good thoughts bear good fruit, and bad thoughts, bad fruit. I was reading the Screw Tape Letters, a novel by C.S. Lewis, and it ties really well to this, as they talk about the interaction between wormwood and screw tape, which are these two quote-unquote devils that are trying to persuade the patient or the individual to leave good and go to evil. They talk about their tactics of just a small degree at a time, that they're trying to take this patient off track. And isn't that the case here with this truth, that these seeds that are allowed to take root eventually produce their own good or bad fruit? So think about the fruits in your life. And this is what I do as I read this: good and bad. So are there areas that I'm struggling in as a father? Is it impure thoughts? Is it finances? Is it nutrition, lifestyle, exercise, relationship with my wife, kids? If there are any of those areas that we're struggling in, and then reverse engineer what our thoughts are, maybe what content we're consuming, what we're allowing into our mind, and potentially we can realize and trace that path from those things that initiate those thoughts, from those thought patterns to the actual actions that are happening, and realize that nothing dramatic, whether good or bad, comes instantly. It all takes time. And that's what that makes me think of. Okay, two more quotes. A man only begins to be a man when he ceases to whine and revile and commences to search for the hidden justice which regulates his life. And as he adapts his mind to that regulating factor, he ceases to accuse others as the cause of his condition and builds himself up in a strong and noble thought, ceases to kick against circumstances, but begins to use them as aids to his more rapid progress and as a means of discovering the hidden powers and possibilities within himself. This reminds me of one of my favorite books, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And this is what we're talking about here, is that we become a man when we cease to blame others and we search for justice. We search for discipline. And then with that regulating factor of justice and discipline and ownership, we start to change our lives. We stop blaming others. We take ownership and responsibility. We don't kick against circumstance, but use it as a tool to increase and enhance our rate of progress. And through that, we discover hidden powers, hidden possibilities, hidden potential. Have there been times in your life where you've gone through a challenge and you've used it to increase your momentum? Have there been times in your life where you've let that whining and reviling and blaming others have a challenge turn into a stumbling block or a wall that keeps you from progressing? Referring back to my recent path, the challenges that I was facing, I allowed whining or negative thoughts and reviling my circumstances to create a larger roadblock than necessary because I wasn't in this place. Sometimes we have to go through that to be able to access that next level. But what a powerful thought that taking ownership and relying on justice and discipline in our lives and not blaming others and seeking to make those challenges actual momentum builders is an opportunity to grow and discover new levels in our lives, progression. Final quote. As the physically weak man can make himself strong by careful and patient training, so the man of weak thoughts can make them strong by exercising himself in right thinking. To put away aimlessness and weakness and to begin to think with purpose is to enter the ranks of those strong ones who only recognize failure as one of the pathways to attainment, who make all conditions serve them, and who think strongly, attempt fearlessly, and accomplish masterfully. That is the message of hope. Now, I love the connection there, obviously, be it with a background in strength and conditioning, to weakness physically, and that turning into strength through careful and patient training, and that connection to weak thoughts becoming strong. And so in order to develop physical strength, we have to expose the body to stress over time. We have to willingly go to a place of discomfort and load certain patterns, certain weaknesses with resistance to build strength. And it's a layer upon layer process. So what we're learning here is that changing our thoughts from weak to strong is very similar to that. How would you do that on a daily basis? How would you train your thoughts? What are some things that you and I can do to train our thoughts to become stronger, more right, more pure, more virtuous? How can we put away aimlessness and weakness? How can we think with purpose? How can we recognize failure as a pathway to attainment and make our conditions serve us? How can we think strongly, attempt fearlessly, and accomplish masterfully? So it is possible to change our thoughts. Even in this crazy world of distraction, in this unprecedented time in human history, it is possible. And one of the things that comes to my mind as I read this is the power of solitude. The power of taking time away from all of the distractions, resetting our minds, resetting our spirits. Do you have a place that you can go for solitude? Do you make time for that in your life? Or are you daily in the grind, in the distraction, in the go, go, go of modern life and have not had solitude? So my encouragement would be for myself and for anyone listening to think about that and try to create space for thought. Nature is an amazing place to go for this. Go on a hike, get out, turn off your phone, sit and think and separate yourself from the world and allow you just be in your thoughts and identify certain things that you can work on and improve. I think also being very aware of the content we consume is another key element in training our thoughts to be stronger. Being actively engaged in what we do and don't consume will really, really help. It's when we're passively engaged in the content that we are exposed to the algorithms and the power of the attention economy. Analog content, i.e., books and writing, can be extremely powerful sources to return to when we feel like we are overly distracted. Solitude and awareness will allow us to have peace and clarity in the decisions that we make and our thoughts. And trust me, I know this is a very challenging thing. It's a work in progress, but the awareness of it and the pursuit of it are where we're going to find the reward. And I believe that fully. So a triple threat father is one who has strong mentality and who develops their thoughts and works on having, right thinking. They develop their spirituality and their physicality. And I'll talk more about those other two elements as time goes on, but I just love that thought process. So what can you do to be a triple threat father and to really lead, provide, and protect at the highest level you possibly can? Well, go out and do it. That's what I'm going to do. And until we talk again, thank you so much for listening. Share this with somebody who may need it. I appreciate your time and being on this journey. We're going to create and grow a movement of men who are impacting the world around them for good through this thing called Full Strength Father. So until we speak again, remember, live full strength or die.